Welcome to Exploring A Course in Miracles. I'm Emily Perry with the Circle of Atonement, here with Circle founder Robert Perry. And today we're talking about how to heal others. This podcast is based on a 6-week course we just completed called Becoming a Course-Based Healer. And it's also a continuation of our efforts at the Circle to ground a tradition of course-based healing in the world. Healing is a major topic that runs throughout A Course in Miracles. The Course acts as if a significant part of its path is having healers in the world, meaning people who go out and actually give physical healing to other people. We've done a couple of podcasts on healing so far, most recently the Formula for Physical Health, but that discussion was about healing ourselves, and this one is about healing others. What we're covering today is relevant whether you want to become a course-based healer or not, because as we'll get to in just a bit, you don't have to be a formal healer to offer others healing in the Course's view. And Robert, this is a topic that I know you've long held very close to your heart. So it must be nice to see so much focus on it here at the Circle, because I know how much grounding that tradition in healing has meant to you.
Well, even though I don't feel like that's my personal calling, it just kind of hurts your heart when you see something that important in the Course, that emphasized in the Course, and it's not even acknowledged much. And there's very, very little being done to express it in the world. There are pockets here and there, but you just want to see Jesus's vision enacted, especially when you know that it could do so much good in the world.
And especially when you know how serious the Course itself takes this topic. In earlier healing podcasts, we've emphasized how much healing appears in the Course. I'll just go through that list very quickly. Healing appears in more than 20 sections of the text. Healing appears a bit in the workbook. There are a few lessons that talk about healing ourselves, but very little in the workbook on healing others. The manual for teachers has the most focus on healing. It has 7 sections devoted to healing out of 29 sections in the manual total. So that's about a quarter of the material in the manual. The Song of Prayer supplement is short. It's only 3 chapters, but one of those chapters is devoted to healing. There's healing in Helen's poems, as we've seen in some of our Sunday gatherings. So healing is absolutely everywhere in the Course. And in the class that we just hosted, you made this really great connection between the Course and healing and Jesus that we should also mention, because I have been really excited about this. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, one thing just we should add to the list of that reflects how much this is a theme in the Course is the title. When you see the title, A Course in Miracles, you think this is going to teach people how to do miracles, and you naturally think of miracles of healing. And the fact that this is such an emphasis in the Course, it shouldn't surprise us, because the Course claims to come from Jesus. Not only was he well known, both in subsequent history, but also his immediate reputation after his own time was about being, in part, about being a wonder worker, about being a miracle worker. And in the Gospels, in addition to healing himself, he sends his disciples out to heal. And there's some very, important and famous material where he basically says that, he's sending them out to heal and to teach. And just a quick quote here from the Gospel of Luke. It says, "Then Jesus called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. He said to them, 'Take nothing for your journey, no staff, nor bag, nor bread, nor money, not even an extra tunic.' They departed and went through the villages, bringing the good news and curing diseases. And what's very interesting about that material is that many scholars feel that that's a little snapshot of what the original Jesus movement looked like shortly after he died. He had followers of his who were traveling out, living an itinerant lifestyle, and doing mainly two things. They were proclaiming the good news and they were giving healing.
I get ridiculously excited when things from the historical Jesus overlap with the course. And so I love this idea that at the end of the text, at the end of the workbook, the end of the manual for teachers, what the course is asking us to do, or at least two special functions that it gives us, is either a teacher of pupils or a healer of patients. And so when you have the message of Jesus, what he asked his disciples to do, which is bring the good news, teach, and cure diseases everywhere, heal, then that overlap is just really cool.
And I don't know if we've actually said it as sort of bluntly as we can, because in the manual for teachers, he not only gives all this attention, you mentioned 7 sections, to being a healer of patients, but then there are also an equal number of sections, roughly, that he gives to the topic of being a teacher of pupils. So in the manual, once you're done kind of doing the course itself and the text in the workbook, and you're ready to take this out and have a function in the world, basically the function he talks about has these two aspects to it, being a teacher and being a healer. And that's exactly what he did in sending his disciples out 2,000 years ago. So I know you love that connection. I just want to make it as absolutely bluntly as we can.
That was so cool. But just moving on, in previous podcasts, we've talked about the causes of sickness from a course perspective. So we won't spend a lot of time on that today. But it is worth noting that we tend to think of sickness as coming from things that are external. So bad genes, disease, accidents, that kind of thing. These are things that happen to us that feel outside of our control. But the Course says that we get sick for a different reason, one that is very much inside of our control. So can you touch on the cause of sickness briefly?
Yes, of course. To put it a different way, it's not just factors outside of our control, it's physical factors, right? We get sick because we were exposed to a communicable disease, because, something went wrong genetically, whatever. And in the Course, it's not physical factors, it's mental. The Course says all sickness comes from the mind. And specifically, we talked at some length about the causes of sickness in the Course, in the healing course that you just referenced. But to boil it down to the 3 top causes, the Course talks most frequently about separation, the belief in separation being a cause of sickness. It talks about the belief that we are sinful because we basically thought and done unkind things being a cause of sickness, and it talks about guilt. We carry guilt because of those things that we've done. And that guilt says that we deserve to be sick. And there's a great line that, I love quoting, which is, illness can be but guilt's shadow. This is from the psychotherapy supplement. So there's this guilt in our mind that says you deserve to suffer, you deserve to be sick, you deserve to die. And that belief casts a shadow onto the body, and the shadow is sickness. So in all 3 of those, and we've tended to summarize those as I'm separate, I'm sinful, I'm guilty. In all 3 of those, we have a belief that there's something fundamentally wrong with us. Now, it's obvious that if you think you're sinful and you're guilty, you think there's something fundamentally wrong with you. But even when you think you're separate, you think there's something fundamentally wrong with you. Because if you're separate, you're alone, you're split off from everything else, you're split off from God, And all of that amounts to this sense that there is something wrong with you. And that belief that I'm separate, I'm sinful, I'm guilty, there's something fundamentally wrong with me, that inevitably, the Course teaches, gets projected onto the body. And now something goes wrong with your body being sort of your representation of yourself in this world. If you think there's something wrong with you at the deepest level, then that's going to manifest as something wrong with you at the surface level.
And this belief, I'm separate, I'm sinful, I'm guilty, this goes on at a conscious level. We feel that, but it also goes on at a subconscious level that we're not in touch with. We talked about this a lot in our Becoming a Course-Based Healer class, where it's almost like this dirge that's going on subconsciously. And that distorted thinking is not only what makes us sick, but it's what made our body in the first place. So it's not like we're in these bodies and we're either well or we're sick. We're already sick, or we wouldn't be in these bodies. So I find that to be a very liberating idea personally, but I've learned the hard way that when I share it, it's unsettling. And I remember just casually mentioning this idea in a podcast that I did recently with Danielle Laporte. And she was like, hold on, stop right there. We need to rewind the tape and sort this out, because that's a very tough cookie to swallow. And so, can you speak to this idea of how the fact that we're already sick or we wouldn't be here can be a liberating versus an unsettling idea?
I think what's liberating about it is it means that sickness, just you can expect it as part of the way things are down here, so that when you get sick, you shouldn't be thinking, oh my gosh, I have somehow violated the natural order and I've really blown it. Everything down here gets sick. It's not just Course students, it's children, it's infants, it's animals. Animals get cancer, plants get sick, everything gets sick and eventually dies. And it's because, from the Course's standpoint, this world is a dream. It's a sick dream. It's a dream made of sickness, made of insanity. And that's why everything here is kind of crazy and everything here is kind of sick. So we should just take it as, yeah, okay, we get it. That's how it goes, and not be so alarmed and disturbed by the fact that, oh my gosh, I've gotten sick.
For me, part of the liberating piece of this is like you'll hear Course students say, I had these negative thoughts and then I got a cold, as if the line between disillusioned thinking and being sick is that direct. And if that line is that direct for you, how can you not feel guilty every single time you get sick? And so if you just think, look, there's a lot going on in my subconscious. I've come into this body with a lot of ancient stuff, and that could be part of why I get sick. Then it takes some of the guilt away, where you're not feeling like, okay, I got sick because of what I'm thinking in this body right now. You possibly got sick because of what you were thinking eons ago.
Which you'd have to still be carrying, or else it wouldn't have any power. Yeah, I mean, I think the Course, it's people could, and I'm sure have, criticized it as victim blaming, because you are responsible for all of it in the Course. One way or another, you're responsible for all of it. But I feel like just knowing that that's what this whole dream's made of, that's why we were born in the first place, it kind of takes some of the sting out of it. And yeah, it could be we got a cold because of thoughts we had yesterday. And it could be because of some ancient pattern we're not even aware that we're carrying deep in our minds. It can be either one. And I think we should just think, okay, well,
Right.
our bodies, for most of us who are listening to this, they're getting older. they don't work as well. They get more problems. And we shouldn't be thinking, oh my gosh, I've been progressively failing as a course student.
Right. And along that line, I know we need to get to how to heal others, but along that line, I just want to touch on one other thing that gets misrepresented in the community, and it's the idea of medicine. Um, I've heard course students over the years say some form of, I'm not sure I should be taking my medicine or not. If all sickness is in the mind, I just need to be having more positive thoughts, and then the healing of the body will follow. And I had a conversation with a course student just a couple of months ago where she was like, gosh, I had the most throbbing headache. And I stood in front of my ibuprofen just debating whether or not to take it. And I was slightly horrified because I know that this woman has three, maybe even four children, and I would never want her to be looking at like a medicine that her child needs, thinking, should I give this to my kid or should I not give this to my kid? So just want to be crystal clear. The course is not anti-medicine. The course's approach to medicine is that medicine can only handle symptoms, not the cause of your illness. So, do you want to say something about that before we move on?
Yeah, I feel like we covered this in the Formula for Physical Health podcast, so we probably should not spend too long on it. But from the course's standpoint, the cause is that deep seated belief that we all came in with of I'm separate, I'm sinful, I'm guilty. Medicine can't do anything about that belief. Okay. It just deals with the physical symptom. However, like while you're waiting around, while you're working on that belief, it's
Take
sure
your pills.
nice. It's sure nice to have some symptom relief. Yeah, take your pills. And I think, as we looked into Christian Science healing, for the sake of the Becoming a Course-Based Healer course, what that implanted in my mind is that course-based healing, which can be such a benefit, can also become an actual danger if it starts telling people like stay away from your pills and stay away from doctors and all that. Suddenly you can have people dying earlier, get living with more illness because they're following a higher path, and now that path becomes a danger to their health. We don't want that.
Right. And it was interesting in the Becoming a Course-Based Healer course when we talked about the different modalities of healing and what course-based healing had in common with Christian Science. And one thing that they do have in common is that both A Course in Miracles and Christian Science say that when it comes to being sick, when it comes to illness, since all illness is in the mind, we have the power to heal ourselves. Where they differ is in medicine. So, Course in
Yeah.
Miracles says take your medicine. Christian Science says don't do that.
Well, just to clarify, the church officially has been backing away. They've been taking huge hits to the number of Christian scientists over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Largely, I think, or at least to some degree, because of this medicine issue. So they've been taking a lot of hits, and they've been on an official level backing away from the extreme position that they generally had going back to Mary Baker Eddy of like stay away. However, the faithful can be kind of stuck in the old ways and still cling to let's stay away from medicine, even while the church officially is kind of softening.
Well, thank you for making that clarification because I certainly don't want to get it wrong. I'm not a Christian scientist. I don't have background in that. So I definitely don't want to misrepresent anyone. But I also want to be crystal clear on the course's position, which is take your medicine. So before we again get into how to heal others, let's just talk briefly, since we've brought it up, about how the course says we can heal ourselves.
Well, the basic idea is you let go of that, you might call it the unholy trio of I'm separate, I'm sinful, I'm guilty. if you let go of that, the Course says that that has the power to heal not only a specific sickness or illness, it has the power to cure you permanently of all sickness and illness. Not only that, it allows you to have a different kind of death where you don't your body just doesn't like stop working because of some really extreme problem or combination of problems. You get the guidance that says it's time to move on to other levels. Your function here is done for now, and you just consciously lay down a relatively healthy body. And to the rest of the world, your body has died, but it's a different kind of death. And this is a death that's been talked about in the East, and in India, it's been called Mahasamadhi. So, from the Course's standpoint, if you really get that I'm not separate, I'm not sinful, I'm not guilty, you get healed of specific illnesses, your body becomes just plain healthy and isn't subject to disease. The Course talks about not aging, and it talks about this different kind of death where you lay the body down. And then there are places, of course, where it's clear that Jesus, he went beyond all of that, and simply his body just vanished because he was no longer dreaming it. That's what we celebrate on Easter morning. We focus on the reappearance of the body, but there was guidance that Helen got in which Jesus focused on the disappearance of the body being the resurrection. So if we really like in the meantime, I'm all for symptom relief, but what he's saying is the real long-term solution to lack of health is healing that core belief system.
It really is amazing to think that we have the power in our own minds to heal our own bodies.
It is. Yeah.
But even though the Course says that we do have the power to heal ourselves, oftentimes we aren't strong enough or spiritually advanced enough to do that. And so that's when healers come in. That's where we need help. And the Course says that healers help by helping us make the choice to remove the cause of our illness, which is in our mind. And there are many different modalities of healing out there. There's conventional medicine, there's Reiki, there's acupuncture, and countless others. And each of them have their own different methods, their own unique techniques. And so let's talk about what is the unique method of course-based healing. How does a course-based healer heal?
I think before we get specifically into that, I'd like to just say something about how the job or role of the course-based healer connects with the fact that we can heal ourselves, because it's of the mind. And what's interesting is when this topic is introduced in the Manual for Teachers, the top that what's the function of the teacher of God in the healing of other people, he talks about how all of what he says reflects the idea that the patient is the one that needs to change their mind. So the teacher of God, or the healer, in this case, the healer's role, is to in some way be the catalyst for that change of mind in the other person. So the section in the manual is section 5, and there's like a subsection 3. It says that the healer comes to represent another choice. They're a reminder. They ask for the right to question what the patient has accepted. They stand for the alternative. There's all these different phrases in there that suggest that in some way they represent or symbolize or stand for to the patient that different choice within the patient that then is the real healer. So it's almost like something happens largely on a mind-to-mind level, where something in the healer's mind reaches into the patient's mind and at some level says, hey, would you consider a different choice? And what it reminds me of, just off the cuff here, is that there's this place not too far into the text where Jesus says that he acts like he was having these unconscious conversations with Freud. So Freud, who's not a believer in Jesus, according to Jesus, he and Freud, on some level below consciousness, are having a conversation. And Jesus says, every time I reminded him of the atonement, which was often, he defended his theory more and more against it. So it's like Jesus is knocking on the door and saying to Freud, hey, what about the atonement? And Freud, unfortunately, is saying, no way. And he's shutting the door. That's kind of what's supposed to be happening between healer and patient. Only ideally, the patient says, okay, I'll make the choice.
And that's why anyone can be a course-based healer. You don't actually have to hang out a sign and say, this is what I'm doing. This practice is something that we can all do at any time. You can look at someone else and stand for that alternative to represent that different choice that they have the power to make within their own mind, because you're making it for them in yours. And that is course-based healing, whether you call yourself a course-based healer or not.
That's very true. And we had that whole part of that course on healing where we talked about the distinction between being an informal healer and being a professional healer. And that distinction is made in the psychotherapy supplement as well. And the idea you get is that everyone on earth is called to the function of healing. The course in, I think, chapter 13 in the text says your function on earth is healing, everyone's function. But then it's clarified in the psychotherapy supplement that there are certain people who have healing as their profession. And he says, and to them, a large number of others go for their healing needs. So we need to be thinking like, okay, am I or am I not called to do this as a formal function? But either way, I'm on earth to be a healer, to be a healing influence.
Remarkable thing if we each thought of that as how to spend our day. Just waking up in the morning and thinking, okay, no matter what my job is, my career is healing, and I am going to go about my day being this presence of healing in the world, standing for the choice that other people have to heal their own mind, because I'm doing what I can do to heal my own.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if in every interaction we're thinking, I'm supposed to be a healing presence for this person.
Right. Okay. So in our class, we had a diagram that we called How the Healer Heals. And this diagram is at the very center of our view of course-based healing. And it comes from a quote in the Manual for Teachers. And this quote is one sentence. It's from Manual section 22, How are healing and atonement related? And the quote says, he, meaning the healer, overlooks the mind and body, seeing only the face of Christ shining in front of him, correcting all mistakes and healing all perception. And we'll include a copy of this diagram in the show notes for this podcast at circleofa.org/podcast. But for now, Robert, let's just talk through what it says. And before we get into the diagram, which I'll share on the screen for those of you who are here watching this live, I just want to be crystal clear about something else. This is the practical piece of course-based healing. This is, from a course perspective, how the healer heals. So in other words, this is what you do.
And just to clarify, the course approaches everything that it teaches, whether it's meditation, whether it's forgiveness, whether it's healing, with a lot of variety built in. But so everything the course says about healing doesn't look exactly like this. But this is a way, in our view, to summarize in one simple picture a huge amount of the course's main emphases on healing. And you'll see this once you get this diagram, you'll see it reflected in many, many places as the Course talks about healing. So the idea is that you can, if you can see this, you see the healer is on the left, and the healer is looking at the patient who occupies most of the diagram. So the very first thing the healer does is look past, overlook the patient's body. Okay. Now, normally we give a lot of weight and significance and reality to the other person's body. And when we're in some kind of healing capacity, or just when the other person is not well, we give a lot of weight in our mind to the specific sickness they have, the particular, the name for it, the symptoms of it, the level of severity, what it could potentially lead to. Could it lead to the person's death, for instance? Could it permanently impair them in some way? And what the healer is doing is their eyes, and this is discussed at length in section 8 in the Manual for Teachers, their eyes are observing all the things that our physical eyes observe, and noting that these things are there, but their mind is placing all of that in one category, which is it's unreal. The body, the symptoms, the name of the sickness, the severity or seriousness of it, the prognosis, all of it is being placed in one category. It's all unreal. And that's why it can be looked past. So the first thing the healer does is look past the body. Next thing is to look past the ego. Now, the actual passage that we're gaining this from says he looks past both mind and body. And so it's body and mind. Here we have body and ego. When he says mind, though, in the context of the passage, it means the mind's beliefs that are causing the sickness. And if the mind's beliefs that are causing the sickness are I'm separate, I'm sinful, I'm guilty, that's the ego. Okay, so I think it's just more like practical and useful to think my job as the healer is to overlook the ego, to overlook, and that's, I think, the stuff that we have the hardest time overlooking in our relations with other human beings, right? Their ego makes them dangerous and unpleasant and seemingly unworthy, and fearful, fear-inducing. So just as with the body, all those symptoms, all those characteristics of the illness and of the body itself are all unreal, so with the ego, we evaluate all the mistakes that they've made, no matter how severe, no matter who was hurt, all their personality traits that express their ego, unpleasant traits. We regard all of that as equally unreal. And the overlooking of all of that is what we normally call forgiveness, right? When you overlook their mistakes, you overlook their ego, what's seemingly wrong with them, that's what we call forgiveness. And that's why the Course again and again equates forgiveness and healing. Okay. So if you can't see the diagram, you imagine the healer on the left looking past the patient's body, categorizing all of it as unreal, looking past the patient's ego, placing all of that in the category of the unreal, and seeing only the face of Christ, which is a way in which the Course talks about the person's true nature. The line that we're going from says, overlooks both mind and body, seeing only the face of Christ shining in front of him. And what the passage goes on to make clear is that face of Christ represents who that person really is. Obviously, it's not a physical face. It might in your mind appear just as a blazing light. But what it means is you're seeing that person as absolutely sinless, holy, worthy of love, worthy of healing, and even divine. And then two more things that we need to draw out here. And these are not mentioned in that sentence that we're talking about, although one of them is mentioned in the next paragraph. But this overlooking of body and ego and seeing only the face of Christ involves seeing the person as your perfect equal. And it involves seeing the person as being one with you. In fact, seeing the patient as one with you is one of the primary emphases in all of the course's teachings on healing. Here's a sentence or a couple sentences from the Song of Prayer that show why this is so important. It says, "You but recognize your oneness with the one who calls for help. For in this oneness is his separate sense dispelled, and it is that separate sense that made him sick." So you overlook body, ego, seeing only the face of Christ while seeing perfect equality. You're not above because you're the healer, and also seeing perfect oneness, realizing it's that person's sense of separateness that made them sick. And the result of all that, to the extent you can really do that, and there's doing it in theory, there's going through the mechanics, and there's doing it genuinely and at depth. To the extent you can genuinely do that, healing takes place.
How the Course puts all of this together. And I think this diagram is really helpful. So again, if you're listening to this podcast, go to circleofa.org/podcast, look for this one, How to Heal Others, and you'll find a copy of the diagram there. But you can see as the healer, what prevents us from seeing that face of Christ in others is the body and the ego. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, we can't quite get past the illnesses because we put them into buckets based on severity. If somebody just has a cold, then we tend to take that less seriously than if someone has cancer. And from a course perspective, it's all the same. And it occurs to me that the same thing goes on with the ego, where if somebody has done something minor to us, then we're more readily able to dismiss it. But if someone has done something horrible, some big betrayal to us, we can't see through that. It's like it's too big, and we can't get beyond that to what the Course is asking us to see, which is this other person as they really are. And so I think that it's helpful to see all of this in diagram form, but it also, like, we don't even need the diagram to understand the concept here. When we can see past someone's sickness, when we can see past their misdeeds and misadventures, we respond with love and forgiveness, and that is healing to them. The Course just takes it a step further and says it actually heals their body. We already know it heals at an emotional level.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. And then the last thing we should mention is that the Course says that this heals the healer, right? So if you can see the diagram, these rays of light are coming off the face of Christ all the way on the right-hand part of the diagram. And one of those rays is shining through, healing that person's mind of the belief in the ego, healing that person's body, and then reaching all the way over to the left-hand part of the diagram and healing the healer. And that's the Course's, what it calls the law of love, which is by giving, you receive.
Yeah, I think when we talk about the face of Christ, that feels very big. As a healer, what we're trying to see is past the body, past the ego to the face of Christ. And I know you touched on this when you were explaining the diagram, but I think it's worth talking a little bit about what we're seeing when we see the face of Christ. The Course defines Christ as the self we all share. It's our true self as God created us. And so seeing the face of Christ means seeing only the part of someone that has reality and truth, and the rest is just dreams. So that's what we're looking at, what's real about them and nothing else. And This is a running theme in the course, by the way, overlooking the body and overlooking the ego, which is to say, overlooking what's unreal and seeing only what is real, is the basis of forgiveness in the course. It's the basis of how we pray in the course. It's how we achieve what the course calls its goal for us, which is to achieve vision or true perception. And so this idea is something that as course students, we should really, really understand.
Yeah, so many things in the course, whether it's vision or healing or forgiveness or salvation, all end up being different words that stand on top or represent the same concept.
So healing can occur in the patient, healing can occur in the healer. But what if it doesn't? So the course talks about conditions under which healing does not occur, and it mentions two of them specifically. So let's talk about those.
We need to, because so much of the time, this is not going to look like it works. I mean, there are miraculous things that happen on planet Earth every day. And most of them, do not become known, except among, some family and friends. But what happens when this doesn't work? What do we think went on there that kept it from working? And as you said, the course talks about a couple of things. One is that if you think about, and I really like that image of Jesus talking to Freud, because it does capture what's going on here. So if Jesus is having this on an unconscious level, this conversation with Freud and reminding him of the atonement, and Freud's like, no, I don't want to hear about it. And he keeps defending more and more against it. So if Freud's not healed there, what went wrong? Freud said no, right? Jesus was offering him healing in some form, and Freud said no. So the course talks about that when you give healing to somebody, they do receive it. The gift is always received, but the language is, this is in section 6 in the manual, it may not be accepted. So it's like the parcel is, not just on their porch, the parcel's inside the front door, but they may not open it. And that's because of their fear of the healing. So when they lose that fear and they're willing to open the package, now healing is theirs on a conscious level. So that's the one factor in this whole thing. They have to say yes.
Why would be afraid of healing? Why are we afraid of healing?
I think it's because it comes along with I think the main thing is it comes along with a letting go of ego. And we will do anything, I think, before we let go of our ego. We think that's us. We think all good things are part of that. All the things that will make us happy are part of that. And so if it means letting go of our ego, I think we generally are not up for it. Even if the cost is we get sick and perhaps we die. And I think we can see stories, not to get too controversial here, but during the pandemic, when it was really roaring, we all were reading stories where somebody would basically rather die than change their belief about about COVID, about the vaccines, about whatever. They chose to die rather than let that thing go, which I think is part of a kind of a collective identity that they share in. And a collective identity is a collective ego. So letting go of that belief meant letting go of their ego in some sense. So there's that. And the second thing is, and I think this is a really important thing, the healer can only give what he has. And this principle is throughout the course. It's basic to the course's discussions of healing. You cannot give what you do not have. So if you haven't allowed healing into your own mind, how can you give it? It's like saying, meet me on this street corner today. I'm going to give away piles of money, even though I'm broke. Like, how do you do that? You have no money to give away. So to the extent the healer has let healing into themselves, they can give it away. And that is not an either or thing. It's a lengthy journey. So the Course envisions healers going on this journey in which they more and more and more accept the atonement for themselves in the language of the Course. And as they accept it for themselves, they can give it. And that's why you have some healers who can do a bit of healing. And you have somebody like Jesus, who, if you read the Gospels, he was just effortlessly doing it right and left with very serious conditions, even people who had a congenital issue like congenital blindness. So, because he had taken so much healing into himself, he could really genuinely look past the body, look past the ego, see only the face of Christ shining in front of him, not as a theory, not as a mechanical exercise to go through, but as an actual sight, an actual knowing and experience. And that meant his power level was off the charts.
That is really fascinating. So if the healing isn't working, the Course says it's because the patient won't accept it on some level, or the healer doesn't quite have the juice to offer it because they're not healed enough themselves. They're an unhealed healer, as the Course would describe it.
Right.
So,
and we should maybe park on the unhealed healer term just for a sec, because that term, which is an important term in the Course, even though it's not used a ton of times, the whole idea behind that term, and the Course states this at one point, is that the unhealed healer is trying to give what he does not have. And we're supposed to look at that term and say, well, that's a bit of a contradiction in terms. That's an oxymoron, an unhealed healer. How can they give healing if they don't have it? So I just want to draw out that that is the whole import and thrust of that term, that, look, we kind of know that if you want to give it, you better have it.
So if we're thinking, okay, I want to be more of a healed healer, we talked in the class about the developmental journey of the healer. So if you're thinking, I need to get more healing within myself so that I have it available to offer to others, what does that developmental journey look like?
Well, I think the reason that there isn't a whole separate description of this in the Course is that this is the Course, right? It's a course in miracles. It's teaching you how to give miracles. So you do the Course, and we have that diagram that we presented a while ago, and we're trying to keep in front of people, of the arch, where you're doing your study, you're doing your morning quiet time, you're practicing on the hour, you're reminding yourself of your idea of the day all throughout the day. You're using Course practice, Course ideas to dispel your upsets. You're asking for guidance about what to do and how to give and how to be truly helpful. And then you're giving miracles. So you're basically, your day is an act of being saturated. And I've been talking recently about this metaphor where I remembered about back when nobody that I had ever heard of did organic farming. My family knew these friends who were like totally into this huge backyard organic farm, where my idea was you do it organic and you get spindly little tiny vegetables and little tiny fruits. And turns out these guys produce these giant fruits and vegetables because, according to my parents, they were constantly nourishing and enriching the soil. And so what the Course is seeing us doing is every day we are nourishing and enriching the soil of our mind. And out of that springs miracles. Out of that, springs something better than giant fruit and giant vegetables, springs miracles. But those miracles are possible because of the soil from which they grew.
I'll add that diagram on walking the path to the show notes for this podcast as well, because there is a structure that the Course is asking us to do to uphold these ideas in our mind. And just even going back to how the healer heals diagram, if you're thinking about that idea or looking at that diagram and all you can see in the other person is how sick their body is or what they did to you, then how healing can you be? And so you can't be a true healer if you can feel all of the judgment, anger, righteousness, and hatred in your mind. You can't be a healing presence if all of that's going on upstairs. And so the developmental journey of a healer is, from a course perspective, doing the practice to break up some of those false and distorted perceptions so that the healing can come through you to other people.
While you're saying that, what occurs to me is that we kind of know what's healing in just normal interaction. If somebody's hurting, if they don't feel good about themselves, we know that the healing thing is not to somehow be correcting and judgmental and tell them how screwed up they are. We know the healing thing is to say, hey, I love you. You're okay.
It's the most healing thing in the world when
And
other people hold space for your potential or
and
hold
what
space for looking past what you've done.
exactly. And we know that on a normal level. And what course-based healing is, it's a concentrated, silent version of that exact same thing. So I think that's a good way to think about it. Like you're just seeing what is truly perfect and clean and okay and worthy in them. And maybe you're not saying it to them, but
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you're seeing it in them is like Jesus knocking on the door of Freud's mind.
Right. And I also want to be clear that when you look past what is unreal in someone else to what's real in them, your response is love, not apathy. So I do think that that's where we can get confused as course students as well, where it's like, oh, you're sick, you've got a tumor. Well, it's not real. And so I'm not even going to acknowledge that that's part of you. And what the course is asking us to do is to look past what's unreal, but at the same time, be loving and caring to the person who's sick. And that's part of the healing process as well.
As well. Yeah. You don't want to just say to them, how did you create this? And you don't have a
Right.
body, and I won't talk about it. There's something
So,
before, I know we're wrapping up here. What are you going to
right.
say?
Okay. Well, there's one last thing I want to say, and it's something that uh, Margaret brought up here in the chat, which is we should, as healers, as course students, trust that no effort is wasted. And so if it doesn't look like someone has accepted the healing that we offer to them, we should just know that on some level they have. It may be not enough to create their own physical healing, but we should have confidence that if we offered healing to some degree, that healing has been received. And I also want to make the point that we don't have to be fully healed to heal. The Holy Spirit can use us wherever we are on our developmental journey. It's just, if you want to be more powerful as a healer, then you need to be more healed in your own mind,
Yeah.
which is why
Right.
Jesus was able to heal the way that he could. We're not
Yeah.
there yet, but
Well,
that doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
of course. And, if giving is receiving, if you want to become more advanced, give what you have, then you receive more, and then you have more to give, and so on. It's a virtuous cycle. But as per Margaret's point, that's the whole distinction between receiving and accepting. If you gave it, all of what you gave was received, even if all of it may not have been accepted yet. So the parcel's in the front door, even if it hasn't been opened yet. So I just wanted to say before we're done here, from my standpoint, Jesus really wants to start a tradition in the world of this kind of healing. He seems like he sure tried to start this 2,000 years ago, but it didn't become a core part of Christianity. It's a part of some elements of Christianity. You have the charismatics and the Pentecostalists and so on, who are into the gifts of the Spirit and are into healing. But Christianity as a whole does not have this robust tradition of healing. And he's tried it with the course. And so far, he's 0 for 2. We have not yet, as a course community, formed a strong, robust tradition of healing via the Course, even though it's a Course in Miracles. So he wants to get this started. It's something that could bring so much good into the world. And the other side of this, which I think is worth pointing out, is that in my experience, a significant percentage of people have this sense, they carry this feeling, the sense of calling, where they feel deep inside that they're meant to be a healer. They are on earth to be a healer. And you and I were talking about Helen's vision of the ancient priestess, where her very first inner vision in 1965 was seeing this holy priestess who was kneeling, shackled in chains, head bowed down. And then as Helen and Bill made their choices for a better way, Helen saw the priestess slowly rising from shackles and being free. And then what she said was, does this mean I can have my function back? And I feel like rather than a holy priestess, like waiting inside of us to stand up and do her function through us, in this context, we can talk about in so many of us, to some degree in all of us, there is an ancient healer in us that is in shackles and is waiting to be freed and waiting to move through us in the world. And when Helen said, can I have my function back? She said she was exhilarated and actually danced around the room. So I know that there are many people who feel something like that, like there's this healer in them. And if they could only get out, they would be exhilarated and unbelievably happy. So from that angle, there's Jesus wants this to happen in the world. There's people can benefit, and there's the fact that there's an ancient healer that needs to be set free in so many of us. For all of those reasons, this tradition needs to start.
Amen to that. So it really is true that there are so many who feel that call to be a healer and even a course-based healer, but just aren't quite clear about what that entails, what that really means. And so it's been good to have these discussions, to have these conversations around what specifically being a course-based healer means. And I love the idea that you don't have to formalize it. We're all meant to be healing in the world, if only a healing presence in the world. So we're all meant to be doing this every single day. So if you're listening and you want to have a copy of Becoming a Course-Based Healer, our live classes have ended, but we do have the recordings in our community. You can find it at community.circleofa.org under courses and trainings. If you're interested, it's all there. On behalf of Robert and I and everyone here at the Circle, thank you so much for listening to our podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.